Till now, Al-Qaeda threats were largely aimed at the United States. Now, a new video has emerged that calls on Kashmiri youth to wage jihad against India. The video is in Urdu and is the first from the global terror network that focuses wholly on Kashmir. Given this new call for war against India, are Indian security agencies prepared for an escalation in violence following the Al-Qaeda threat?
This is Al-Qaeda's warning to India, the global terror network urging Kashmiri youth to wage jihad against India. Titled "The War Should Continue, a Message for Kashmir's Muslims," the video features a statement by Maulana Asim Umar, one of Al-Qaeda's two Pakistani propagandists. It calls on Muslims in Kashmir to follow in the footsteps of their brothers in Iraq and Syria. The latest video, uploaded on jihadi forums by Al-Qaeda's media arm, Al-Sahab, is probably the first that specifically focuses on Kashmir.
It is in Urdu. Al-Qaeda videos are usually in Arabic. So in that respect, it is a very, very important development. It features one of Al-Qaeda's Pakistani ideologues talking about the need for jihad in Kashmir. So in that sense, it is very significant.
Analysts say the video is an indication that Al-Qaeda has increased their focus on India.
Something that people who have been tracking Afghanistan and Pakistan have feared for some time. There's been a fear that as the American-led troops begin to pull out from Afghanistan, there will be an effort by the jihadi leaders in Pakistan to turn the focus back onto Kashmir. In fact, groups from Pakistan had gone to Afghanistan to fight in the jihad there. But now there are fears that groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed and the United Jihad Council will again begin focusing on Kashmir.
India, however, says it's prepared to face the Qaeda threat. Internal security is already one of the biggest challenges for Narendra Modi. But is the new government ready to deal with the rise in jihad against India? Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
There's trouble in Iraq and Syria already. How seriously should the new Narendra Modi government take this threat by the Al-Qaeda? Joining us on center stage tonight, I want to begin by introducing Lieutenant General S.A. Hasnain, former General Officer commanding 15 Corps. He commanded the army in the valley. Joining us also in a new capacity as the diplomatic editor of the Hindu newspaper, Suhasini Haidar. Welcome. From Ambassador K.C. Singh. With us from Pakistan tonight, Vice Air Marshal Shehzad Chaudhary. And for a perspective on what this means for the Indian police and India's internal security, we've got M.N. Singh, former police commissioner of Mumbai. General Hasnain, I'll start with you. How seriously would you, if you were still commanding the Kashmir Valley, take this latest threat put out by the Al-Qaeda asking Kashmiri youth to rise against the Indian state?
Okay, I would say this is not something new. It's happened in the past. The last time I know of it, 2006, a similar threat in the month of October was issued by the Al-Qaeda. Today, the situation, the environment that the world is seeing is an environment of irregular warfare. Something which is happening in West Asia, Afghanistan, the drawdown is taking place. There is internal security problems within Pakistan. And in the midst of all this, you find Kashmir stabilizing. Just about 150-200 terrorists left, and the resistance movement is floundering. So a message of this kind to try and bolster the motivation and the morale of the terrorists in Kashmir was expected. But having said that, one thing is a message, the other is capability and capacity. I don't think the Indian Army, although it will not take this lightly, but I know that the Indian Army today is a much more experienced army than what it was in 1989. We never had the Rush rifles at that time. And we had all the equipment, the surveillance equipment, the night fighting equipment available to us today. I think we are so much better prepared today that this threat is really saying not a very serious threat.
Okay, you're saying this is not a very serious threat because, Suhasini, when I spoke to some former army officers, they suggested that this is more rhetoric, this is more chest beating. The Al-Qaeda really doesn't have the penetration and the infiltration to be able to inflict damage. They're already in trouble with the ISIS going rogue, and therefore this is just an attempt to tell their cadre that keep your morale high and that we are still in charge.
Well, just because they haven't been successful in the past does not always mean that they and they won't be successful in the future. So you have to always keep your guard up. But I think very clearly, if you look at the nature of this message, the fact that actually they're not just exhorting Kashmiri youth, they're actually berating them and saying, why have you forgotten your cause? Almost, in fact, what seems to me some kind of an acknowledgement that in fact in Kashmir today there isn't a fertile ground for the Al-Qaeda. So I would see this as a message certainly that India needs to take at least as seriously as their security agencies tell them to. It is a message that people in the other parts of the world should look at very closely too. You know, a few years ago the US found itself weirdly on the same side as Al-Qaeda when they were calling for the end of Assad in Syria. You see these same fighters now speaking about another area and almost saying that this is our intent. This is where we want to head next. I think it's not just India that should take these things seriously. I think countries like the US really need to look at it.
Ambassador Singh, you've got a couple of thousand mujahid at the very least who will be relatively jobless after the American drawdown in Afghanistan completes itself. In that scenario, this is what Indian experts have been fearing for a long time. Do you see the Al-Qaeda taking the first step towards funneling all those jihadis towards Kashmir?
See, firstly, there's no such thing as Al-Qaeda as an operational organization. There is Al-Qaeda Central, Zawahiri and people around him. They've been lying low because of the drone attacks and so on and so forth. Even their messaging is through messengers and so on and so forth. Now, they definitely play a role in terms of inspiring global jihad. So these are more exhortations to people to, and most of the regeneration of Al-Qaeda which has taken place are self-starter groups. You find whether in Nigeria or you have them in Oman or you have them in Yemen and so on and so forth. So therefore there is no such thing as a central organization any longer which is issuing instructions and it has operational control over it. Secondly, Al-Qaeda always had Kashmir but lower down, and there was a reason for that. Because the groups that Pakistan, the official part of Pakistani state which was supporting the India-specific groups did not want to hand over those groups to Al-Qaeda, because if Al-Qaeda starts dealing with Kashmir, then Kashmir will not be part of a negotiating tactic with India where you can switch jihad on and off. Al-Qaeda will switch it off.
Okay.
Whereas the military authorities in Pakistan
I want to try at this time to establish a contact.
No, one more point. That it is, let's not think of Afghanistan the way it was in 1990. Because even when the US withdraw, as yet we don't know, there may be a residuary force around. Status of forces agreement may come about when the new president comes in. And there is a lesson for Afghanistan from Iraq, because Maliki sent all the Americans out, lost his air cover, and you see what's happening to Iraq. So I have a feeling the next Afghan president is going to see some residuary American force in Afghanistan.
Go across to Srinagar at this time and establish contact, if we can, with Asiya Andrabi. She's the leader of Duktarane-Millat, and we're seeing Asiya Andrabi suggest that representatives from the Al-Qaeda and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan met her in Srinagar, established contact and tried to get her to front operations for the Al-Qaeda. Ms. Andrabi, welcome to Headlines Today. हम जानना चाहेंगे कि आप जो कह रही हैं कि एक मुलाकात हुई तहरीक-ए-तालिबान पाकिस्तान और अल-कायदा के नुमाइंदों के साथ जिसमें उन्होंने आपसे कुछ पेशकश की अल-कायदा के ऑपरेशंस को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए, उसके बारे में आप हमें बताएं।
Just in 2013-12, Philippines came to me, and I've already said that they told me that we belong to Al-Qaeda and Taliban, but I don't know who they were. So I told them that it's your job, it's not my job. If you want to wage a war in Kashmir also, and if you are part of international global Al-Qaeda organization, you are having your own agenda, you are having your own program. So why to ask a woman who has nothing to do with such activities?
Ms. Andrabi, what exactly did these people who claim to represent the Al-Qaeda suggest to you? What were their expectations from you? You're a well-known separatist leader operating out of Kashmir with your own identity. What exactly is it that these people expected you to do, Ms. Andrabi?
Actually, they told me that when NATO will flood from Afghanistan and they will leave Afghanistan, we, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, are making plans to come to Kashmir so that Kashmir will get free. And India has illegally occupied Kashmir, and India has no legitimate right on Kashmir. So we the Muslims will come and will free you from Indian clubs and Indian illegal occupation. That's what they were saying and they were planning to do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrabi, for joining us. What you are suggesting, General Hasnain, is very significant. Here is Ms. Andrabi saying that people have already been in touch with separatist leaders like her, trying to see if they can rope them in to try and flame and carry the torch for the Al-Qaeda.
This is nothing new. All this while, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Al-Badr, all of them are surrogates of the Al-Qaeda. After all of them have been active. Why would suddenly the Al-Qaeda want to suddenly come in and assume leadership itself? As Mr. K.C. Singh very correctly said, Al-Qaeda is not an operational entity. It is essentially a apex entity, motivational kind of an entity. And besides that, this kind of a problem has to be seen from two angles. One is the military angle and the second is the social angle. From a military angle, let me tell you, the Indian Army is fully prepared. Why the Indian Army? I would say the entire security forces of Kashmir are entirely prepared, Jammu and Kashmir. The Jammu and Kashmir police is very professional. The CRPF is there, all prepared. I don't anticipate any problem at all on this front. On the social front, there can be a bit of a concern. Over years, we have seen the entry of a radical ideology emerging in Kashmir. This is something which is a little disturbing, though not completely alarming as such. It is something which needs to be monitored. It's something which our intelligence agencies need to keep a control over and keep a gaze over, because we cannot allow this kind of a thing to suddenly overflow. You know, a typically Salafi ideology which is emerging to replace the Sufi ideology of Kashmir. This is something which is not very welcome in the valley for us.
I want to go across to Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry and understand what Pakistan is making of this threat by the Al-Qaeda, because so far it's been the ISI that's been controlling and directing all terror operations in Kashmir. Now you've seen the Al-Qaeda jump in. Is this in continuation, sir, of the ISI's policies of waging proxy war in Kashmir, or do you now see the Al-Qaeda try and go over the head of the ISI and open a parallel front in India, sir?
Well, I think you're basing your discussion on an entirely misperceived context. Al-Qaeda used to be a force or an entity. I think it's dissipated tremendously over the last few years. What used to be perhaps few thousands of Al-Qaeda fighters or Al-Qaeda entity, or what composed Al-Qaeda entity, is now reduced to perhaps in tens, maybe 10, 20, 30, it's a guess, anybody's guess. When you say Al-Qaeda Central, this Al-Qaeda Central has now dissipated into what went initially Al-Qaeda into Arab Peninsula, Yemen essentially. And then you've seen an alternate rise of leadership within this Islamic militancy, what you're seeing in Syria and Iraq in terms of the ISIS. This seems to me at least a desperate attempt at trying to regain the center in some form or the other. Now, Al-Qaeda itself doesn't exist, as K.C. Singh mentioned, perhaps in a very, very fringe way. But by doing what they have done, they are perhaps trying to establish themselves in the middle of something which is non-existent. Pakistan has been very clear in terms of its intent, in terms of your last government as well as your new government, in trying to improve relationship. I think there's been a good recorded reports of the violence going down in occupied Kashmir, or what you call Jammu and Kashmir, and these are your papers and your reports, not Pakistan's. And if you believed in those, then the fact is that perhaps any aspect or any attempt that you perhaps now want to malign the Pakistani agencies for, perhaps is also non-existent. My suggestion is to look at Al-Qaeda in the form and shape that it exists today. It's hardly there. What you're looking at, however, are very alternate movements that are taking place in the world of militant
Dr.
Islam.
Ayman Singh,
and that's where we need
what
to
are the ramifications of this threat by the Al-Qaeda in areas outside Kashmir? In the heartland, do you see the possibility of more spectacular terror attacks of the likes that we saw in 26/11 go up, now that the Al-Qaeda wants to get in and target India directly? Or do you agree with the rest of the panel who suggest that the Al-Qaeda itself is beleaguered and is now trying once again to establish its supremacy?
Well, Rahul, first of all, this is not the first time that Al-Qaeda has tried to instigate the Kashmiri Muslims to work against India. And they have repeated this, they keep repeating it from time to time. But nevertheless, I would say that Kashmir, there are elements in Kashmir who are prone to be taken in by this Al-Qaeda propaganda, and I would say that Kashmir remains vulnerable and it calls for the utmost precautions and all the care. I have no doubt that the Indian military authorities are very capable of dealing with the problem, but it is not so much of a military problem. The problem here is of an attempt to radicalize the Indian Muslims, both in Kashmir and elsewhere in India, and that we have seen in elements of Indian Mujahideen who are linked with the Al-Qaeda and who have been found to be operating as an affiliate of Al-Qaeda in India. Recently, if you have noticed, the NIA and the Maharashtra ATS have filed charge sheets against Yashin Bhatkal and others, in which they have given graphic details of their linkages with Al-Qaeda, the kind of support they are getting, funding they are getting, and even ambitions of acquiring things like nuclear weapons and missiles and things like that.
Okay, that's an interesting point you make, and I want to put that question, General Hasnain. How does the nature of anti-terrorism operations in Kashmir change if these thousands of Afghan Mujahid were to actually land up in Kashmir? I've spent some time at some terror camps inside Shopia, in areas of Tiger. Now, the sense that I picked up was that the Afghan Mujahid who were present over there are far more hardcore, far more radical, care very little about the Indian people, about the Kashmiris, and therefore are far more destructive than local militia, local terrorists who actually come from the valley.
Absolutely. What you are talking about, Rahul, is something which was happening 10 years ago, when Afghans were actually there. Today, there are no Afghans inside Kashmir. But going back to that period, yes, you are absolutely right. When the Afghans were there, and there were many other foreign
terrorists. Do you see that happen again? That's what they're threatening. They're saying caravans are heading from Afghanistan. That's essentially what they're saying.
Let's be realistic about it. The fact is, everyone outside is relating this 10,000 ISIL terrorists in Syria and Iraq to 10,000 entering into Kashmir overnight. This is not going to happen. In 1989-90, when all this movement started, right through the 90s, you never had a thing called the LOC fence. Today you got the LOC fence there, which is a system by itself. It's not just an obstacle, it's a system by itself. The Indian Army's got a focus on it, it's got experience in handling it. Besides that, you've got an array of equipment there. We've got 25 years of experience. The first point is, how are 10,000 terrorists going to enter?
No, let's assume for a moment that they don't enter simultaneously. So asking, if they were to enter in drabs, in bits, does that still change then the nature of insurgency in Kashmir?
Look, I think we do have to understand, if everyone is agreed that Al-Qaeda is basically a motivational force, that it's not actually there on the ground anymore, then the question has to be, are they in a position to actually have any kind of impact on the ground in the valley? I would disagree with General Hasnain when he says that he's worried about the Salafist tendencies in the valley, because what we have seen in the last few years is a move away from militancy. In fact, all the protests that we saw in 2010, in the years preceding to that, we saw people come out to protest, but did they carry anything more than a stone? Did anybody in fact pick up a gun or a knife? No. So the question is, can Al-Qaeda have that kind of impact inside the valley or in any other part?
No, but then there is a difference. You're suggesting it's only a motivational force, and I'm questioning whether it's the actual Afghan Mujahideen, Afghan battle-hardened Mujahideen who will be coming in once again, as was the case several years earlier, because they're very ferocious, completely brutal, cold-blooded, and they couldn't care less. They couldn't care about which woman they're going after, whether somebody is a civilian or an army person. Do you see that context change after the drawdown, sir?
No, you are assuming firstly that Afghanistan will be overrun by the Taliban and becomes a base camp for supplying the people. Now, it's not the same as 1990s. 1996, Taliban captured Kabul. Kabul is not going to be captured by them. Firstly, Taliban of Afghanistan has to either come to terms with the government there. There will be a newly elected president with a trained army, with probably the presence of Americans till about 16 or 18. Now, therefore, it is not the same thing that the war has ended there and surplus people are available who will be pushed there. Pakistan army itself is fighting TTP. So this churning which is going on in the border of Afghanistan will go on for the next 2-3 years. There is no surplus people available.
In the previous instance we saw the ISI play a very active role, Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhary, in taking those Afghan Mujahideen from the battlelands of Afghanistan and transporting them into Kashmir. Given the fact that you've now launched a full-fledged operation against the TTP in Waziristan, will we see the Pakistani army adopt the same standards when it comes to India, or will we once again see them try and distinguish good Taliban from bad Taliban and send their headache towards us?
Well, it's not possible to physically send the good or the bad Taliban to Kashmir because of the physical situation on the ground today. The Pakistan army has joined battle, entered battle in fact already since the last couple of days, and it's going to stay for a long haul. If that is the case, then obviously the Pakistani military is fighting the Taliban, and this is regardless of the hue and the color that they belong to. If that be the case, and the ultimate aim is to establish stability in Afghanistan so that Pakistan can be stable. In fact, a current refrain in Pakistan, largely believed by the people, is that India has a hand in spoiling things for Pakistan from FATA, within FATA. And therefore, the Indian intelligence and India has a very damaging role.
Yes,
in
you raised the bogey of Baluchistan. Not one shred of evidence was provided for that. Now you're suggesting that the Indian intelligence agency is active in FATA without again providing any evidence to substantiate that, sir.
Rahul Kanwal, you have a responsibility to defend your position, but please let me make my larger point. So what I'm suggesting to you is that we are trying to actually establish stability and peace within our own regions and supporting whatever that comes in terms of Afghanistan. We're not looking for the Taliban to become
I'm out of time on this debate.
That they have.
So I have to ask
just a minute. Please.
Yes.
No. You let me finish my point. Thirdly, Al-Qaeda is a global phenomenon. It doesn't only belong to Pakistan. It has been actually something that has been working within Pakistan.
Okay, very quickly, Dr. Aman Singh, do you believe Pakistan, when they say that there's no question now of trying to distinguish good Taliban from bad Taliban? We're taking on all of the Taliban and therefore don't think that we'll try and funnel Afghan Mujahideen into India. We've learnt our lesson and we won't. Dr. Aman Singh, very quickly, we're out of time, sir.
Well, Rahul,
you got to let me speak to make my point.
Al-Qaeda is just like a holding company, but it has lots of affiliates. Right now, the Pakistani hand is full fighting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Both are fighting each other. So to that extent, I suppose we have less of threats from Pakistan state as such, or we have no threat. I could even go to that extent saying. But elements like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and other Talibani elements, which are the affiliates of Al-Qaeda, they are certainly going to create a problem. There have been times when many nationals, foreign nationals, have been active in Pakistan, in Jammu and Kashmir, and they have been fighting on behalf of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is not a force, it is an ideology, it's a holding company, but it has a lot of people fighting for it and for its ideology.
Well, this is clearly a threat that cannot be dismissed lightly. India needs to take full cognizance of the threat and be ready to deal with the consequences, whatever they may be. To all our guests for joining us on Center Stage tonight, thank you very much.